I never thought the sound of a door closing could echo through the rest of a life, but that night in Chicago, it did. The sharp click of the lock behind me was more than a sound. It was a line drawn in steel between who I had been and who I was about to become. My name is Elena Brooks, and this is the story of how being cast out of my family's home led me to build an empire worth $300 million, and how I learned that love without respect is worth nothing at all. I grew up in a modest white brick house on the south edge of Chicago, near where the wind carried the smell of the lake. My father, Mark Brooks, worked at a local bank. My mother, Grace, was a schoolteacher who believed that daughters should be humble and obedient. My sister Lily was 2 years younger than I, and for as long as I can remember, she was the chosen one. Lily had that kind of charm that made people forgive her for everything. She could break something and make my parents laugh about it, while I could fix something and still get scolded for trying to show off. I learned early to keep quiet and work hard. My parents said that girls like me, serious, steady girls, should marry well. They never asked what I wanted. So, when I met James Parker, a thoughtful engineer from New York, and he asked me to marry him, I thought maybe, finally, life was shifting toward me. We planned a small ceremony by the lake. I had saved carefully over the years, and the money I'd set aside for the wedding felt like proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet. But when my parents found out how much I'd saved, everything changed. They sat me down one Saturday evening. My mother had that polite smile she used right before she said something cruel. "Your sister's having a hard time, Elena," she began. "You know her boyfriend lost his job. You could help them." "I do help," I said carefully. "I already helped them with rent last month." My father cleared his throat. "Your sister needs your wedding fund," he said flatly, as if it were already decided. "You'll have time to save again. Lily's in crisis." I stared at them. "That money is for my wedding. For my future. I've worked for years. Family comes first." My mother cut in. "Be grateful you can help." Something in me broke quietly then, not in anger, but in disbelief. "No," I said. It was a small word, but it changed everything. "I won't give it away." They both looked at me as though I'd said something obscene. My father's voice rose. "You selfish girl. After all we've done for you." "Done for me?" I laughed, a thin, shaking laugh. "You mean the years of being invisible while Lily got everything she wanted?" My mother's face hardened. "If you leave this house with that attitude, don't come back. Go and get married alone." And that was it. The words hung in the air like smoke. I went to my room, packed one suitcase, some clothes, my laptop, a few papers, and walked out the front door. They didn't stop me. I can still feel the chill of that April night, the way the wind bit through my jacket. When the door slammed shut behind me, I realized I wasn't afraid. I was free. What they didn't know was that I wasn't just walking away with a suitcase. I was walking away as the secret owner of a vast business network. For 3 years, I had been building a company in the shadows, registered under a shell name, North Star Systems, with its headquarters quietly located in Boston. It began with a single software idea, a logistics platform that matched truck fleets to warehouses more efficiently. The first time I sold the program to a distribution company in Houston, I made $60,000 in profit. I reinvested every dollar. Within 2 years, I owned fleets in Denver, storage facilities in Ohio, and a clean tech division that designed energy-saving systems for small factories. No one, not even James, knew the full extent. My employees thought they were working for a group of investors in New York. I was one of them, just E. Brooks on the documents. My personal bank account had grown quietly into 8 figures. Through holding companies and trust accounts, the value of what I owned, assets, contracts, patents, had reached nearly $300 million. But at home, I still drove a 6-year-old Toyota and wore the same coat I'd had since college. I didn't want to show off. I wanted peace. That night, I checked into a downtown hotel under another name. I sat by the window and watched the city lights blur through the rain. For a long time, I thought about calling my parents, begging them to take back their words. Then I realized if I had to beg for love, it wasn't love at all. In the morning, I opened my laptop and did what I always did when I felt uncertain. I worked. I emailed my lawyer in Boston, confirming the acquisition of a smaller tech firm in Seattle for $4.2 million. I approved payroll transfers, $10,000 bonuses for my best engineers. Then I called my real estate agent, a woman named Claire, and told her I wanted a house in Brooklyn, New York. Something open, modern, and private. Money wasn't an issue. By the end of the week, I had wired $12.5 million for a property overlooking the East River. When James called, worried, I told him everything. He was silent for a long moment, then said, "So you're basically a secret millionaire?" "Closer to 300 million, I said. He laughed softly, not out of shock but admiration. "Elena, you could have told me. I needed to know who loved me for me," I said. He drove overnight from New York to meet me. We had breakfast together in the hotel lobby, talking about plans and futures. He didn't ask for money. He only asked if I was okay. That's when I knew I'd marry him, not because he was perfect, but because he saw me. A week later, as movers carried boxes into my new Brooklyn home, I stood by the tall glass windows and looked out at the city skyline. It glittered with promise. Somewhere beyond those towers were people who believed they'd push me down for good. They had no idea I'd been climbing in silence all along. I spent the evening unpacking my few belongings. I placed the small childhood photo, me, Lily, and my parents by Lake Michigan, on a shelf. For a second, I felt that old ache, that wish to belong. Then I turned away. I had built something greater than their approval. I had built my own world. That night, before bed, I opened my journal and wrote, "The door closed. Let it stay closed. Tomorrow begins everything new." I didn't know then how far that promise would take me, but I knew I would never again let anyone decide my worth or the price of my peace, in dollars or otherwise. The morning after I left my parents' house, the air felt sharper, cleaner, like the city had changed while I slept. Maybe it was me. I woke up in the hotel room to the hum of early traffic on Michigan Avenue, sunlight spilling through curtains that smelled faintly of detergent. For the first time in years, there was no one waiting to tell me what I couldn't do. The silence was mine. I checked out of the hotel with one suitcase in hand and a plan in my head. I was done being the quiet daughter who never took up space. I wanted a place that reflected who I had become, the woman who had built an empire in secret. I called Claire, the real estate agent I trusted for my business dealings in New York, and told her to find me something extraordinary. "Do you want to finance it or pay cash?" she asked. "Cash," I said, without hesitation. Her pause on the other end of the line told me she wasn't used to hearing that from a woman under 30. By evening, I was flying to New York City, and by the next afternoon, I was standing in front of a house that would become my beginning, a tall, glass-walled structure in Brooklyn Heights, overlooking the river. The price was $12,500,000, and I didn't blink. The home wasn't loud or showy. It was strong, open, and modern. The kind of place that didn't need to shout to be noticed. I signed the deed, transferred the funds, and walked through the front door as its new owner. It felt like walking into freedom. The floors were polished oak, the walls white and full of sunlight. The kitchen faced east, so every morning it would flood with gold. I loved that. After years of living under my parents' dim ceiling lights and darker expectations, I wanted a home that was nothing but brightness. I placed my single box on the marble counter and looked around. This house didn't hold memories yet, only possibilities. Inside that box were three things: my laptop, the binder of contracts that had built North Star Systems, and a framed photograph of me as a child by Lake Michigan, grinning in the wind. I set the photo by the window. For a long moment, I stared at it. The girl in that picture didn't know she'd one day be running a $300 million network of companies or standing alone in a mansion she bought with her own name. She just wanted to be seen. I smiled at her. "We made it," I whispered. The first night was quiet except for the echo of my own footsteps. I unpacked slowly, room by room, savoring the control. I brewed coffee, sat cross-legged on the kitchen floor, and wrote a list of what I wanted my new life to look like. At the top of the page, I wrote, "No more permission." It was simple but powerful. The next morning, I transformed the spare bedroom into my command center. 2 large desks, 3 monitors, and my favorite steel gray chair. It felt almost symbolic, bringing my empire into the open. I logged into my company dashboard and saw the day's figures glowing on the screen. Profits climbing, contracts secured, investors requesting meetings I'd ignore. I smiled. Everything was thriving. I decided it was time to start giving back. On the first day, I transferred $5 million into a fund for women entrepreneurs who needed seed money but had been turned away by traditional investors. I called it the North Star Grant, after the company that had carried me out of the shadows. On the second day, I donated $250,000 to a women's shelter in Philadelphia, one that helped survivors of domestic and financial abuse. I wrote in the note, "For every woman who deserves to start again." On the third day, I sent $10,000 bonuses to every member of my executive team. They didn't know I was the one behind the anonymous owner's fund. I liked it that way. Real gratitude didn't need a name. Around that time, James came to visit. He brought a basket of fresh bread, a bottle of wine, and a handful of wildflowers wrapped in brown paper. When he stepped through the door, he stopped, taking it all in. "This place is incredible," he said softly. "It's home," I replied. Finally. We ate dinner sitting on the floor, using an unpacked box as a table. Between bites of bread, I told him everything. The full truth about my company, my wealth, the empire I had hidden from everyone, even him. For a moment, I feared he'd pull away, that the weight of it would build walls between us. But he didn't. He just looked at me with a quiet smile. "I love your mind," he said. That was the first time I truly believed someone meant it. Over the next few weeks, I began to build a rhythm in that house. I'd wake before sunrise, open the glass doors, and breathe in the scent of the river. The city stretched out before me like an invitation. Sometimes, when the wind carried the sound of church bells or laughter from the street below, I realized how alive everything felt now that I wasn't hiding. But freedom has its own loneliness. At night, when the lights dimmed and the city outside glittered like distant constellations, I would think of my parents. Did they miss me? Did they feel guilt? Or were they too proud to look back? I'd imagine my mother pacing the kitchen, whispering to my father about how stubborn I was, how I'd learn eventually. They didn't know I had already learned everything I needed the hard way. One afternoon, I received a letter from Lily. I hadn't spoken to her since that night in Chicago. Her handwriting was still round and cheerful. The note said, "Mom and Dad are worried. They think you're angry. Maybe you could come home and talk." I read it twice and tore it in half. Not out of hatred, but out of peace. I didn't need to go backward. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. I placed the pieces in the fireplace and watched them curl into ash. As weeks turned into months, my house filled with signs of life. Books on the coffee table, art from small galleries in Soho, a piano I never played but loved to see by the window. I invited a few close friends for dinner, people from my business network who didn't know me as the quiet daughter, only as the woman who made things happen. They toasted to success, but I toasted to silence, the kind that comes when you finally left behind the noise of other people's expectations. By the end of that first season, my name was beginning to surface in small financial circles. Articles hinted at an unnamed woman running a major logistics network across America and Europe. My lawyers said it was only a matter of time before my anonymity vanished completely. But for now, I enjoyed the calm before the storm. Every morning, I'd stand at my window, watching sunlight pour into the house I chose, thinking of the road ahead. This chapter of my life wasn't about revenge or even pride. It was about presence. I had been invisible for so long that I forgot how to live out loud. Now, every decision I made, every dollar I spent, every step I took in that house was a declaration. I exist. I built this. I belong here. And for the first time in my life, I felt exactly where I was meant to be. The morning of my wedding began with the sound of rain tapping softly against the glass walls of my Brooklyn home. I sat on the edge of my bed, wrapped in a white silk robe, watching the city fade behind a veil of mist. It felt poetic, almost symbolic, the calm before a storm I didn't yet know was coming. I wasn't nervous, not about marrying James, not about the vows or the ceremony. What I felt was a quiet certainty, a sense that after everything I had lost, I was finally choosing something that was truly mine. We had planned a small wedding in Central Park, just by the lake where the willows leaned low and the air smelled faintly of spring. I paid for everything myself, no sponsors, no favors, no loans. The total came to about $180,000, and I signed every check with satisfaction. The dress, the quartet, the open-air permits, the catering from a boutique kitchen in Soho, the delicate cake with pressed white roses, all of it was my decision. Every detail whispered freedom. My guest list was short. I had invited people who had earned their place in my story. Monica, my operations lead who had helped me manage North Star Systems during its first chaotic months. Ethan, my lawyer from Boston, who had made sure my empire stayed hidden when I wanted it to. Rebecca, my mentor from the early days, who had taught me that power and kindness could exist together, and a handful of friends from Los Angeles and Miami, people who had never cared about my last name or the balance in my account. It was an intimate circle. That was the point. James's family came from New York, warm and practical people who welcomed me as though I had always been part of them. His mother, Evelyn, hugged me the first time we met and said, "You're family now, sweetheart." I remember thinking how strange it felt to be accepted so simply, without questions or conditions. That was the love I'd been craving all along. Then, 1 week before the ceremony, the secret I had kept for years broke wide open. It began with a headline in a major trade paper. Quiet CEO in America builds $300 million network. Underneath was my name, my company's, my story. They called me the silent builder, the woman who had turned logistics and clean energy into a hidden empire. The article listed assets, valuations, and even photos of my facilities in Denver and Houston. They compared my success to some of the most powerful founders in Europe. Overnight, I became a name that everyone wanted to know. I read the article twice, then set my coffee cup down and smiled. It was strange to see my life summarized in a few glossy paragraphs, but it didn't scare me. I was done hiding. Still, I knew what this meant. My family would find out. And they did, within 24 hours. My phone started buzzing endlessly. Calls from unknown numbers, old acquaintances, even former teachers. But the ones that mattered didn't come. My parents didn't call. Lily didn't text. Not one word. The silence said more than anything could. I knew they were watching the same headlines, calculating, regretting, planning. And I knew, deep down, that they wouldn't stay silent for long. The morning of the wedding, the rain stopped. By noon, the sky cleared into a soft blue. Central Park looked like a painting, the grass glowing, the trees shimmering from the storm's touch. I arrived in a simple white dress, not a designer label, just something elegant that moved when I walked. I had chosen it not to impress, but to feel at ease in my own skin. James stood waiting under an arch of white blossoms. The quartet began to play. Guests turned to watch me walk down the path, and I felt an overwhelming stillness. This was it, the life I had built, the choice I had made, the love I had earned. Then I saw them, my parents and Lily. They walked right past the ushers as if they owned the place. My father in a stiff gray suit, my mother wearing a forced smile, and Lily, dressed as though she were the bride herself, in a pale gown that shimmered too brightly in the sun. The music faltered for half a second before picking up again. My stomach turned. They hadn't been invited. They had kicked me out, told me to marry alone. And now here they were, drawn not by love, but by money. My father approached first, arms spread wide as if nothing had ever happened. "Elena," he said, his voice syrupy, "you look beautiful. We're so proud of you." My mother chimed in, "We knew you'd make something of yourself. We just wanted to be here for your big day." And Lily, always the bold one, smiled sweetly and added, "Maybe we can talk later about some opportunities. A small investment, just a couple of $1 million to help me start something new." The world seemed to narrow around me. The laughter of guests faded, the wind stilled, and for a long second, I felt like I was standing back on that porch in Chicago, with the door slamming behind me, hearing my parents say, "Go and get married alone." I turned to the head of security, Daniel, a tall, calm man I had hired not just for safety, but for peace of mind. "Please escort them out," I said quietly. My mother gasped. "You're serious?" "Yes," I said. "Very." They protested, whispered things, ungrateful, selfish, show off, but I didn't flinch. They were removed gently but firmly. As they walked away, I caught my father's glare and my sister's bitter smile. I felt nothing, just release. James took my hand, and the music returned. We finished our vows under the golden light breaking through the clouds. When I said "I do," it wasn't just to James. It was to myself, to the life I had chosen, the boundaries I had built, the woman I had become. After the ceremony, while guests toasted with champagne, I quietly signed a check for $500,000 to the Central Park Conservancy. I wanted to give something back to the place that had witnessed both my pain and my triumph. "Let's make sure these trees live longer than our mistakes," I told James, and he laughed. The reception was perfect, simple, elegant, filled with laughter that felt real. No staged smiles, no hidden resentments, just warmth. We danced under string lights until the moon rose high over Manhattan. When I looked around, I saw faces that had chosen to stand beside me not because of what I had, but because of who I was. Later that night, when James and I returned to our Brooklyn home, I slipped off my shoes, stood barefoot on the cool floor, and exhaled. The air was still sweet with the scent of rain. I thought about my parents, about how they would wake up the next day angry and humiliated. Maybe they'd tell people I'd changed, that money had ruined me. Maybe they'd say I'd forgotten where I came from. But they'd be wrong. I remembered everything. That's why I knew I could never go back. That night, before I fell asleep beside my husband, I wrote a line in my journal. "Some doors you close twice. The first time when they lock you out, the second time when you choose never to knock again." And I meant every word. After the wedding, life slowed down in the best way. The chaos faded, the noise of reporters disappeared, and what remained was quiet, a silence that didn't feel empty, but earned. For years, I'd been fighting to be believed, to be loved, to be enough. Now, for the first time, I didn't have to fight it all. I had peace, and I intended to keep it. I kept my Brooklyn home, that tall glass sanctuary that had become both my office and my refuge. I woke every morning to sunlight streaming across the hardwood floors, to the sound of the city below that no longer scared me. My life was no longer about escaping the past. It was about building the future, on my own terms. People kept asking if I had forgiven my family. The word forgive sounded heavy, like something I was still expected to give them. But forgiveness, I realized, isn't always a door you open. Sometimes it's a door you simply walk past and never return to. I didn't call them. I didn't send a letter. I didn't even check if they had tried to reach me. I told my lawyer to reject any financial requests from them and blocked their numbers. I didn't send them $1, not even £1. It wasn't hatred, it was peace. I wished them well, far away from my life. Instead, I poured my energy into something better. North Star Systems was thriving. Our clean energy logistics software had expanded into Europe, and new contracts were flooding in from France and Germany. We opened a new hub in Seattle, and during a launch event, I announced a company-wide salary increase, $8,000 for every full-time employee. The applause that followed filled me with a kind of pride that money alone could never give. I wanted to make an impact beyond business. So I created the Future Founders Program in Detroit, offering $15,000 startup grants to young women who dreamed of building their own companies. The first 20 girls in the program reminded me of my younger self, hungry for freedom, underestimated by everyone around them. When I stood on that stage, looking at their hopeful faces, I told them, "You don't need permission to build something great. You only need courage." I saw tears in their eyes, and I knew I was changing more than businesses. I was changing stories. At home, life with James became my calm anchor. He cooked dinner most nights, usually far too much pasta, while I sat at the counter going over business reports. We'd laugh, talk, and plan small trips. Love, for the first time, didn't feel like a battle, it felt like home. He never treated my success as something intimidating. Instead, he said, "You've built a world worth walking beside." And I believed him. Still, some nights I woke up thinking about Chicago. I could almost hear the sound of that door slamming, the echo of my mother's voice saying, "Go and get married alone." But instead of anger, I felt gratitude. Their rejection had been the greatest gift they could have given me. If they hadn't pushed me out, I might never have discovered what I was capable of. To make peace with the past, I began therapy with Anna, a gentle but sharp-minded woman in Manhattan. Each Thursday morning, I sat across from her on a soft gray couch and untangled years of silence and guilt. One day, she said something that stayed with me. Closure isn't something you wait for. It's something you decide. From then on, I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. My story started to spread again. Magazines wrote features. The quiet CEO who built a $300 million empire. From rejection to power. People wanted interviews, partnerships, publicity. But I stayed out of the spotlight. My wealth was never the point. My peace was. On our second wedding anniversary, James gave me a small plaque. It said, "She built her own door and walked through it." I hung it above my desk. Every time I read it, I remembered the girl who stood outside her parents' house with one suitcase and a shaking heart, and how far she had come. Sometimes I still walk through Central Park, past the lake where I married James, where the rain turned to sun. I think about that day, about how I told security to escort my family out. I don't regret it. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way. Today, I live with peace, not perfection. I run my empire. I love my husband. I help others build their dreams. And I carry my story not as a wound, but as proof that I survived. I was told once to go and get married alone, and I did. But I didn't just marry a man. I married freedom, and I've kept it ever since.